Okay, let's talk about etiquette. For a lot of people, that word probably brings up images of, I don't know, stuffy dinners.
Right, like knowing which tiny spoon to use or maybe just feeling a bit inadequate about the whole thing.
Exactly. Like this whole set of kind of arbitrary, maybe even old-fashioned rules.
Yeah.
But what if that's missing the point? What if etiquette is, well, something deeper?
Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much the question we're digging into today, based on this really interesting source document we've got. It's titled Ushnie Asine.
Which translates to the skill of the art of etiquette.
Mm-hmm.
And like, right off the bat, this source kind of flips that whole idea of just stiff rules.
It really does. It points out the word etiquette is actually French, and it means, well, it means taste, but also respecting oneself and others.
Taste
Okay.
and respect. That's already a different frame, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It defines etiquette as the art and rules for dealing with people politely, gracefully. But the really key insight I think that it gives us early on is why this whole art even developed.
Okay, why did it? According to the source.
Well, it argues it's because we humans were fundamentally social beings. We're wired to seek connection, appreciation, and respect from each other.
Interesting. So our mission for this deep dive then is to really get past just, the surface level stuff and pull out the core principles, the real insights from this source. What's it telling us about the actual art and skill involved here?
So, yeah, like we said, the source really anchors etiquette in those two ideas: taste and respect for self and others. It frames it less like a list of do's and don'ts and more like an art form, the art of interacting politely, gracefully.
And that point about why it developed seems really important. It's not just some tradition handed down or, something for the upper classes,
Yeah,
according to this document.
exactly.
It's saying it comes from our basic human nature. We live together, we bump into each other constantly, and we have this fundamental need for, well, respect and maybe understanding.
Right. So, etiquette in this view is sort of a necessary toolkit for navigating that shared social world smoothly, harmoniously.
A framework, maybe, for people trying to connect positively and get that recognition.
That's a good way to put it, a framework for coexisting gracefully, yeah.
Okay, so if it's this fundamental art form for social interaction, where does the source say it actually applies?
Yeah.
Seems like it covers a lot of ground.
Oh, it does. The source lists quite a few specific areas where etiquette is relevant. It talks
Right.
about conversation, obviously,
Right.
also the workplace, and yes, eating and drinking are mentioned. But, and this is interesting, the focus seems less on the specific fork, like you said earlier, and more on the interaction around the food.
Ah, okay. What else?
It also covers social relations more broadly, things like dealing with the opposite sex, how you interact with children,
Hmm.
and also navigating relationships with, neighbors, friends, colleagues, the everyday stuff.
It really feels like the source is suggesting etiquette isn't just for special occasions then.
Not at all. It presents it more like a guiding principle for pretty much any kind of interaction you might have on a daily basis. It's quite pervasive.
That scope is, yeah, it's broad. But if it's this big art or skill, it can't just be about memorizing rules. You mentioned it goes deeper, like into the kind of person you need to be.
Absolutely. And this is where I think it gets really fascinating. It shifts from the actions to the how or maybe even the who. It lays out several essential inner qualities it says you need to cultivate to really practice etiquette effectively.
Okay, let's get into these. What are these qualities the source highlights? It says, first, you need to be objective.
Yeah, objective, meaning you need to weigh discussions, dialogues with honesty. The source really emphasizes honest conversation, steering clear of bias, or getting fanatical about your own point of view.
And being open to other people's opinions, too.
Crucially, yes, being willing to accept other views. It ties objectivity directly to, well, good social exchange,
Yeah.
intellectual honesty almost.
That's interesting. So good etiquette in conversation isn't just politeness. It's about fairness.
Okay.
What's the next quality mentioned?
The source says interactions need flexibility. Basically, being willing to make some concessions sometimes in conversations, not being totally rigid or stubborn about your own opinion.
Ah, okay. So maybe like knowing when to give ground a little
Yeah,
for the sake of keeping things smooth.
precisely. That ability to adapt, for the relationship or the interaction itself.
We'll probably see how that connects to some of the specific rules later on, I bet. What's next?
Be humble. This one's quite profound in the source.
How so?
It explicitly states that humility raises a person's status in God's eyes, and it stresses that there's really nothing in life that justifies arrogance.
Wow. So it connects etiquette to something.
Yeah.
Well, almost spiritual or deeply moral here, not just social graces.
Exactly. It really elevates the concept. Then there's be patient.
Patient. Okay, that seems practical.
Very. The source advises cultivating patience specifically to handle, let's say, foolish behaviors you might encounter from others. It acknowledges interactions won't always be easy.
Right, because it's not just about your behavior, it's how you respond when others aren't maybe behaving perfectly.
Exactly. Your patience is key to maintaining your own grace in those moments. And last one,
What's the final quality?
be more rational. The source really pushes for using your intellect in dealing with different situations. It even says intellect should overcome emotion when you're judging others.
So a measured, thoughtful approach rather than just reacting emotionally?
That's the idea. Keep a cool head, basically.
Okay, wow. So putting it all together, this source is saying the skill of etiquette isn't just knowing protocols, it's about actively cultivating objectivity, flexibility, humility, patience, and rationality. That's a much richer picture.
It really is. It argues that genuine etiquette flows from this internal state. The outward actions are sort of a natural result of having these qualities.
All right, let's bring this down to the practical level now.
Mhm.
How do these big ideas, the principles, the inner qualities actually show up in everyday actions? The source
Mhm.
gives some specific rules and examples, right?
It does. It offers some general rules for interaction, particularly conversation, like your voice. It should be pleasant, moderate in volume, and clear.
Makes sense. And it says, don't be artificial or pretentious. Be genuine.
Right. And it also brings back that flexibility point, suggesting you should make some concessions in your speech, especially it notes when talking to older people, respecting their perspective, perhaps.
It also advises against being overly curious, doesn't it? Prying too much.
Yes, which ties back nicely to that core idea of respecting others, respecting their boundaries.
And here's one that seems to directly apply those inner qualities. It says, avoid conflict with friends by specifically not discussing controversial topics.
Yeah, that's a very direct application of flexibility and maybe patience, choosing harmony in the relationship over potentially winning an argument.
What else in terms of general rules?
Well, avoid talking constantly about yourself. That could link back to humility, couldn't it? Or even objectivity,
Sure. And the classic one, don't interrupt people while they're talking.
a fundamental. And conversely, it encourages actively listening to others and even complimenting what they say sometimes, showing you value their contribution.
So these general rules seem like the nuts and bolts of demonstrating that underlying respect and taste the source talks about.
Pretty much. And then it gives even more specific examples, like the etiquette around serving and receiving food or drink.
Okay, what does it say there? When you're serving,
Presentation is key. It should be a polite and graceful, it says, no matter the setting. And importantly, use appropriate, refined words when you offer something.
and for the person receiving, they have a role too.
Absolutely. They also need to be polite. The source suggests using phrases of praise, maybe flattery, compliments about the food or drink.
And here's a really clear rule that seems to test that patience and respect. It says you must not criticize the food, no matter what you actually think of its quality.
Exactly. It's a very direct instruction. The focus isn't on your food review, it's purely on maintaining the grace of the interaction and showing respect to the host or provider.
It completely separates the social act from any judgment of the actual food.
Yes, the interaction itself is paramount.
Okay, so let's try and tie this all together for you listening. We've journeyed through this source, the skill of the art of etiquette, and seen how it presents etiquette as something really rooted in taste and respect, not just arbitrary rules.
Right, and how it argues this art applies across almost all our social interactions, from work to family to friends.
And maybe most importantly, how it links truly effective etiquette to cultivating these core inner qualities: objectivity, flexibility, humility, patience, and rationality.
And then we saw how those foundational ideas translate into practical guidelines, general rules for conversation, and even specific examples like serving food.
So the source really offers this whole framework. It suggests etiquette isn't just about putting on a polite face, but about working on your inner state of respect, and then using practical rules to create smoother, more harmonious interactions based on that state.
Yeah, it's less about just memorizing what to do and maybe more about becoming a certain kind of person in your interactions, a way of being almost.
This deep dive has definitely revealed a perspective on etiquette that's, well, richer and maybe more challenging than the usual idea. It suggests mastering this skill involves internal work just as much, if not more, than learning external behaviors.
It really pushes us to see courtesy not just as surface polish, but as something tied deeply to our character, our thinking, and our basic human need for positive connection.
So thinking purely based on the source material, which connects etiquette so strongly to these fundamental qualities like humility, patience, rationality, does cultivating this skill actually change who we are on a deeper level? Or is it, in the end, just a very sophisticated set of behaviors we learn to apply when needed? Something to think about.